9 Inch Nails' Ghosts and 9 Inch Nails' The Slip. Since the marketing schemes for these albums are practically the same and they came out the same year, I'm going to be talking about both of these albums. Starting with Ghosts, 2008. I was just getting into 9 Inch Nails. Year Zero came out a year before that. It was the first album I ever heard. The Year Zero remix album came with a bonus disc filled with all the song data for remixing, so that's what I was doing on the 9 Inch Nails website, was remixing some of the songs on there. Given that I was visiting this website often, I was really happy when I finally saw on the newsfeed that Ghost was going to be released. And even better, the first part of it was going to be free of charge. The free download would only feature the first 9 songs on this album, so when it was finally released on CD and had all 36 songs on there, I went and bought a copy really quickly. And what Ghost basically is 36 instrumental tracks. 36, that's a lot of music. And on top of that, it came out the same year as The Slip, and that took 4 weeks to record. So, between 2007 and 2008, he has come up with so much music. It was a dream come true. Now, these instrumental songs, they're industrial, they're noisy, they're ambient, and they sound really good. They're produced really well. Atticus Ross joined in for this album for the production part. This would be one of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's starting places. From here on, they would build a career together, making musical scores. Not to mention Atticus Ross was also in How to Destroy Angels, but that's another story. The way this album plays out, this album has 4 LPs, so each LP would have its own ghost story. Ghost 1 on one LP, Ghost 2 on another LP, Ghost 3 on another LP, and so on. Ultimately, I think that they tell different stories with different moods. But as far as what they sound like, imagine what the instrumentals on The Fragile sounded like. Now add a bit more noise to them, and there you go. But there are 36 of these instrumentals. There are like no lyrics whatsoever on this album. And that's fine, but it's not something that you can casually listen to. This is the type of album that you listen to while reading a book, or going to the library. And if you want to listen to this album on vinyl, you're going to have to space it out. Because this album is 2 hours long. That's a lot of times that you're going to have to change sides and switch records. Obviously not for the casual listener, but I really like the concept. It says on the sticker, soundtracks for daydreams. Yeah, pretty much. You wouldn't believe the daydreams that you could have while listening to this album. But Ghosts wasn't just an album, it was also a marketing experiment. Trent Reznor came up with the idea. If you were to give customers the choice of either listening to the album for free or paying for the album, what would the results be? Of course, some people still bought the album, a lot of people downloaded the album for free, but it showed that people were still willing to buy albums. A lot of this stems from his feud with Interscope during Year Zero's release. Apparently, Interscope wanted to jack up the price for Year Zero, and Trent wasn't happy with that. He thought that music fans shouldn't have to pay any more than they have to if they want to listen to music. And this is why after he got out of his contract with Interscope, he decided to release his next 2 albums on his own. These albums being Ghosts and The Slip. The Slip would have the same marketing concept as Ghosts, but instead of just part of the album being released for free, the entire album was released for free! Yay! Lots and lots of people downloaded this album, but tons of people were still willing to spend money on the album. Even though the CD run was limited to 250,000 copies and the vinyl copies were limited as well, it showed that people were willing to support their favorite bands, you know? Great marketing scheme, but what about the album itself? It's got some great hard hitters on here. 1 Million, Letting You, Discipline, Demon Seed. Fantastic songs. And the album's produced really well, even though it's kind of compressed. But something that I hate bands doing with a passion is when they release albums and the first song are basically just a minute of silence. That's all the first song on this album is just a minute of I hate when bands do that. It's a waste of time. Nobody's gonna listen to that unless they have to, unless they feel like, oh, I want to listen to the whole album. It's just a little pet peeve of mine. When I listen to albums, I prefer you open up with the songs like Head Like a Hole. You know, instead of a track of noise being on its own, Head Like a Hole, you know, it starts with a few seconds of noise, and then it kicks in 20 seconds later with the song. It builds up a dramatic effect, and it's more effective that way. But when you release noise songs as the intros, it just doesn't serve a purpose. It's a waste of space. Some may argue that this builds up a dramatic effect for 1 Million when it kicks in, but I don't know, I just prefer songs to be the intros instead of noise. That's just me though. Speaking of waste of space, the first 2 minutes of Corona Radiata are basically the last note of Lights in the Sky, sustained. Yeah, like the final note of Lights in the Sky was like, da, and then the first 2 minutes of Corona Radiata are just 2 minutes of that noise. And then the song finally kicks in. It's like, what a waste of time and space. Why do we need to hear 2 minutes of that? I feel like it was just an effort to increase the time of the album. But with less space, you could have made this pressing a little louder. You know, some people complain about the sound quality of this pressing being noisy and everything. I think the first half of it sounds fine. It's the second half that I think is the problem, and I don't even blame the record pressing. I blame it on the second half of the album being as quiet as it is. Like 3 out of 5 songs are so quiet and everything. You know, I mean, maybe change the track order a little bit. Like, most of the loud songs are on the first half of the album, and those are the ones that I go crazy over. So in other words, I like the first half better than the second half. It's a little inconsistent, and it takes a little time to grow on you, but it's a good 9 Inch Nails album. Instead of being instrumental noise and ambience that was Ghosts, this is a more straightforward alternative rock and industrial album. And I like the result. But as a fan, I can't tell you how excited I was when this album came out and knowing that I didn't have to pay anything for it. Now obviously I did it anyway. Actually, this is the first vinyl album I ever paid for with my own money. And this was a year before I got my own record player, so this album holds a historical value for me. Everybody has that story. What was the first record you ever bought? Well, this one. As a result, these 2 albums are interesting and entertaining experiments in the 9 Inch Nails catalog. Definitely 2 for the history books.